Welcome to tutorial 3. We're going to paint this pristine polar bear, and I thought for a change we'd employ some ink. We'll do pen and wash. Okay, so we'll be doing I'm going to do a loose sketchy outline of the bear and let that dry, and then when we come to do the washes on top, the black ink will stay in place and we'll have the nice contrast of the crisp white, sort of pristine blue white colours of the bear and the surroundings, and then the sort of hard black irregular sort of lines going through. So I'm using Dr. Martens Bombay Black India ink. When it's dry, it's waterproof. Okay, so any black ink that dries waterproof can be used, or you can use, you know, fine liner pens that are permanent, you know, the sort of Sakura ones or Faber-Castell ones, and there's loads of other types that you can use to do the black line work if you want to. Or you can just use a very small brush, very fine brush, and dip it in black paint and do the drawing work with that. You can use any black that you want, black acrylic markers, etc. What I like to do is decant some ink into my little, I've made this, it's a little ink holder so that I haven't got to sort of keep judging the distance deep into a pot of ink. This is a small little cup of an aerosol. So with my ruling brush, you can do this with a bamboo tool, you know, or a dipping ink pen, or a ruling. This is a ruling tool which you can use the little dial on it to make it go tighter or wider, and then that affects the sort of the thickness of the line that you're going to produce. So I'm going to use my ruling tool and I'm going to start doing my polar bear outline. Some of my I'm going to make sure I do the claws in black, and then some little tick marks for the sort of fur surrounding them. I'm going to use a mixture of sort of flowing lines and then sort of staccato lines, you know. These are sort of the more flowing lines of the rocks. You can make them thicker and thinner. I've smudged that one now. Yeah. Try not to do as I just did and smudge the ink. Doesn't look as nice when it's smudged. I don't think so anyway. So we get a nice drawn feeling with this. And then once this is dry, we're free then to sort of splash washes on, you know, a bit hit and miss. And it doesn't matter if we don't define the bear exactly with the washes, because the line work does that for us. So we can apply quite loose hit and miss type washes to the bear. And the contrast between these black marks and the watercolour washes can be quite effective. It's quite an illustrative style again. I like the freedom of the ruling tool, the ruling pen, sorry. And again, I'm sometimes leaving a break in the line. I'm not making the break solid, making the line solid all the way. Just leave a few gaps. But when I get to a change in direction, like say there, where the belly meets the sort of joint between the two legs, then I will have the solid line so that the reader can, the viewer can see that. Same here where the shoulder and the back sort of meet. I'll have that definitely done, and same under the chest there. But then elsewhere it can be a bit more patchy, because the intersections are the most important sort of edges of your drawing. I like seeing him come into shape, and his head, I'm going to take a bit more care on the head just to get that clear. I might end up going back in with some white gouache, you know, and putting a little white highlight in the eye. Okay, so there's our basic drawing. And let that dry, and then we can come in with some splashy blue washes. One thing, make sure that you wash your tool straight away, because the shellac in this permanent waterproof black India ink will adhere to whatever tool you're using, and it's quite a devil to get off once it's dried, so I get it off when it's still moist. Okay, so I've got that off there now. So basically I took the hairdryer straight to that. I didn't wait for it to sink in or anything, because it's just India ink that I'm drying, and drying it with a hairdryer doesn't have any ill effects on it. Okay, so what I fancy doing is using my 2-inch brush. You know, where I've asked you to get these big brushes of knife for underwater realms, and sea mammals is part of the underwater realms theme. So I'm just going to get my thing under there, my protector to sort of protect the sheet underneath. So I thought I'd go blocky, you know, I'd go blocky and use these big brushes, which will make me work blocky and in a simplified way. So I'm going to start off with some manganese blue hue. By the way, you know, if you want to use any of the new colours that we've used this time, the Ocean Blue by Roman Schmall or the Lunar Blue by Daniel Smith, feel free to do that. So I'm just going to start over here and see what happens. That's nice. Maybe add some teal blue, cobalt teal blue to that now. Oh, and it's nicely fading out at the bottom. Right, I'm going to move to a bit of amazonite now. Let's have a bit more amazonite. Bit more amazonite again. And I'm leaving the bottom unfinished and a bit jagged. You can see that's a bit jagged there. I'm just going to let all that run across there now. And then run back the other way a bit. And back there. Now we've got the grayscale, haven't we? Okay, so we can see that if we want to really push the polar bear in some places, we can do really dark against sort of his head, dark against his back, just to create the form a little bit. So I'll do that. I'm going to pick up some strong French ultramarine blue and some manganese blue, stronger than it currently is, and maybe I'll just block that area in. And then I'll let it cascade down a bit, perhaps a bit darker again. So manganese blue and French ultramarine blue. And if it bleeds into the head of the polar bear, don't worry, we can always suck it up with a thirsty brush. I'm just going to pop in some of the bricks, some of the rocks now. Right, also on the grayscale, it's very dark over here by the by his rump. So So I'm going to get that in. Again, I don't mind if I have a few dribbles coming down the side there as well. I'm going to pick up some amazonite now, just like dipping that in the amazonite. Where can I put the amazonite? I feel like cutting in there. And then perhaps under his head as well. So just drying off a little bit in places. Tell you what, I'm going to get all of that in the amazonite. And then echo it out a bit. Like that. Okay, I have to block that in, but I'm going to lift some out. Right, there's a little bit of dark in between the legs there. I'm going to have this stone boulder and this colour here, amazonite. So it's very, you know, you're limited into what sort of brush strokes you can do, so you've got to keep it very big and open. Okay, what I'd like to do at this point is come along with slightly damp tissue and lift out some highlights off his back and his head, and his foreleg, that's quite highlighted, and that bit there on that leg. So those highlights, in fact, a bit more down on his shoulder. So I'm looking at my grayscale now and getting those, see those highlights coming out over his shoulder more, and the back leg is a bit paler because it's catching ambient light, and a bit of light on the toe there of that one. This one is much, I'm just trying to find a clean bit of tissue. This is damp tissue, so I'm just wiping out those highlights there. It might bleed back in a little bit, so you'll have to rub it out again. Yeah, so we've got a little bit of contrast in him there now. So I'm going to drop in, I'm using the same colour now that I used for some of the background to get some of the more shaded parts under his fur, under his mouth there. This is going to be very loose rendition under the belly, right up there into the haunch between his back leg and his back. It's very dark there. And then as it comes into the light, you can break it up a bit. So I'm using the corner of this big massive brush to just do some very light fur texture on this polar bear. His form's starting to come now. It's quite a sort of playful, more like a child illustration type scene, this one, isn't it? Than our more, you know, painterly watercolour ones. So in between his front legs, there's a dark area as well. Very dark. And then it breaks away out into the light towards the right-hand side. That, and up there's quite a bit of sort of shadow up towards the ear, and it goes over there, up the side of his face. Like that. And now I think I'll finally go for a smaller brush, about a size 6 round brush, which I've moistened and flicked. And I'm just going to blend in, rinse, flick again, blend in those areas if they're looking a bit too hard. Okay, and now just to finish off, I'm just going to pick up my ruling pen and dip in some ink and let that happen in places. And so do just squiggle it down to unify it with the foreground rocks. I'm going to tip this forward a minute to encourage the water that was there to bleed with this black ink that I put in the background. And wherever you can see that you've got some moisture, if you haven't got any moisture, you can just re-wet an area, you know. You will cause a bit of a background in the icy blue that you've put out there. I'm just going to moisten this. See, that's flaring nicely now. Really giving us the dark contrast. Rinse. I'm going to rinse that, flick it, and then brush up and let that bleed down a little bit more gradually. This is bleeding nicely at the back now. Again, you can let it bleed on its own or encourage it out with your own brush. A mixture of both. So I've dropped that ink there. I'm gonna look at that. Isn't that fantastic? Because we've got the boundary of the drier paper inside and then the wetter area that I've just created. See that there? And again, if it's not bleeding enough, then just provide some more moisture for it to bleed out into a bit more. And then we're getting some nice abstract shapes. Just going to tip that, let it flow out a bit more there. Quite like that. It might actually be some, I don't know, pine trees at the water's edge or something, because on this in this photo you can see that there are trees there, aren't there? There's a shoreline right at the top there. So what I might try and do actually is come along with a credit card and squeegee something out. So I got my credit card now, so I'm going to say I'm going to bring the horizon down, you know, sort of a bit further down. Let's just scrape that up a minute to create a separation. Let's see if I can get it roughly the same over this side. Yeah, it's about there. Scrape that up there. And scrape across, and we get a separator there. And then I'm going to drag down to mimic that reflection, and drag out to mimic that one, and then press that in now, because that's got a bit of black ink on it. And press in and maybe drag across and make them into little tree shapes, pine tree shapes. I'm going to pick up some darker amazonite now. I'm going to go for strong amazonite and some French ultramarine blue. And I'm going to do an as above, so below. So I'm going to drop in some real strong colour there and have it come down right into the water by these foreground rocks. Some here, but we won't see the reflection because the bear's in the way. Then have some there and some there. So we're building some sort of environment around the bear. I'm going for my rigger now. I'm just going to moisten my rigger a little bit. I'm going to touch it into some neat moon glow. And just create a tree shape, slightly crooked, coming across that green sort of that white swathe there. Then I'm going to redo this one, wider at the base. I'm touching it right up to the polar bear's back of his neck. That's some wiggly stalks. Take that out wider again. And taper these out a bit more. So just trying to build a little imaginary scene, maybe a childlike scene around the bear. I'm going to try and do some tree reflections in the water now as well. So wider at the base. I'll pick up some of that black ink there actually and rub that in as well. And thinner as it gets to the top. Borrow some of that green. Okay, I'll pick up some more moon glow. I'm going to have a tree sort of tilting over a little bit like that. A little bit wonky. Some more moon glow. It's a bit too thick. Again, this will sort of show off the back of the bear. Because he's very pale and this is very dark. So he's framed by some more trees. I sense the need to put some darkness in there, just between his back foreleg and the back leg. Okay. How about we have another tree here? Because it's still a bit wet up here. So I'm hoping it'll give me a nice blur. And that tree is blurring into the sort of black inkiness that I put around the bear's rump earlier on. But I'm going right down to the waterline, and the waterline is that white line that you can see there. That white line there scraped across. It's there, but it's a little bit lost. I'll re-scrape that. So I'm happier now with how that's. Let me zoom out a bit, show you. Okay, so we've got the feeling of cold, sort of frostiness and everything there. Now I fancy just putting a little bit of white gouache into the mix now to help unify the bear to say the foreground rocks. So I got some gouache, and it's slightly thin cream, I'd say that consistency is. Can you see that thin cream? So I'd like to put some sort of dollops of this now, and risk, I mean, we might get some bleeds, so I'm going to put some pure white now on the bear where he'd be catching most of the light. On this foreground, foreleg, front leg. And then scruffle it over to sort of blend it into where it goes a bit bluey grey. He's looking a lot whiter now, isn't he? He's really white here. I'm using the tip of my brush then to just flick the sort of hairy nature of this white gouache into the blue grey areas a bit more. I'm going carefully around that ear there and down to the face, into the head. A little bit of a white tad there. Again, if you're looking at your grayscale, you can see how white then turns to grey and turns to very dark. So I'm roughly following that grayscale pattern. And the white fur brushes outwards, you know, from the central, really white bit of it. And this fur is very white over here. And I'm going to run some of that white down onto the top of these most foreground rocks to suggest snow there. So right above his eye is really white and on his snout, but then under his eye is a bit of that blue-grey. Okay. So it's much lighter down in there, according to my grayscale. I'm going to follow that because it helps me build the feet. I know they're very loosely painted, you know, this is not a biological, anatomical study at all. It's more of a sort of playful Christmas card, childlike rendition. Right, and I feel we need a spatter of snow now, so I'm adding a bit more of a brush full of water to this. I've got a little bit of moisture in some areas of the painting, so I'm going to speckle the snow in those areas, and it's bleeding nicely. It's got that magical mystery woodland about it. I've done a swathe there. Whoops, I'm just going to pick that up. Oh, don't want that to look too much like a line. Okay, and there's basically our pristine polar bear. And I hope it might inspire you to, you know, you could paint this directly on a small watercolour card and send it as an original, you know, playful Christmas card. You could come along when everything is dry and add some flecks of gold leaf if you've got some gold leaf left from the course if you did the Enchanted Evergreen, or you could use acrylic gold marker, any gold markers, and that's some sort of pockly marks of gold and everything. But I've enjoyed doing him as a simple and short video, because we've had an awful lot of long videos in Underwater Realms. So thanks for being a pleasure patron, and I'll see you in the next demonstration on the 21st for the bonus tutorial then. Okay, bye for now.